Hi there everybody, my name is Aubrey and I'm an opera singer and a voice coach. So I have realized one of my favorite things about making reaction videos is not necessarily the actual reacting to the singers that I'm doing, but actually providing hopefully constructive feedback to help not only the singer who's in the video, but also potentially other people who are learning how to sing to explore their voice and potentially work through challenges that are being presented in these clips. So in an effort to try and continue doing this, I decided to go through a bunch of famous horrible singer recordings and give legitimate feedback in an attempt to try and help people discover how to use their best voice. So although a lot of these videos are probably many years too late, I still find them to be extremely interesting because they live on in perpetuity. Despite the fact that this particular video that we're watching today is 7 years old, I regularly hear people talk about it. So it has apparently preserved itself. Although, of course, being infamous is not necessarily the same thing as being famous, these videos still provide us with a lot of really useful educational material. So without further ado, let's go spend some time with Fergie as she sings the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly wave at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming.
Let's pause right there. So as you can hear, she's got a lot of variation in her vowel shape. We talk about vowel shape on this channel probably more than any other technique, and this particular video I think is often known as a bad recording because of the sheer amount of vowels she's using that she really doesn't need to use. A really clear example of this is instead of singing ramparts, she's singing ramparts, and that is not a very appealing sound. So in a lot of cases, the audience is going to react kind of negatively to that. She also tends to darken a lot when she goes into the lower range. So when she goes streaming, you can hear it's a lot of coverage instead of keeping it nice and light. One of my favorite things to tell students is when you're trying to sing in the lower part of your range and it's challenging, you think of a gentle smile, not literally smiling, but just kind of keeping it right in the cheeks. So instead of going streaming into the chest, it kind of goes almost nasal, streaming. And that allows you to have a lot more continuity across the whole voice. So you don't lose that color and end up sounding like a totally different singer. As we're listening, it's really hard for me to hear what her sound is. I am having trouble pinning down her technique, her style, and it kind of goes all over the place. We got some jazzy tones, we've got some R&B color, we've got some pop sounds, and none of it really sounds like a cohesive idea. And we're also even starting to see her messing around with her breathing. I don't know if that's potentially because she's getting nervous, because that's always very possible. The first thing to go is our breathing, but I'm starting to feel like she's not finishing out a lot of her notes. So they're kind of closing off and collapsing pretty quickly, or she's manipulating them about halfway through the pitch instead of going right straight through with a nice, clean, pure, open vowel. So as she's going through, it sounds really funky. It's not something that's completely unfixable, and I wouldn't even consider this the worst version of the national anthem I've ever heard. It's just that lack of consistency really sticks out and makes the audience unsure of what you're trying to do, which is why you're kind of seeing people smiling or kind of laughing a little bit, because in a lot of cases, some of these textures she's utilizing might be construed as comedic, and we don't want to go that direction. But instead, what I think she's actually trying to do is play with texture and almost add some of that, like I mentioned earlier, jazzy texture to it, and I don't think it's really hitting. Despite the fact that jazz often comes across as off the cuff or full of ad-libbing, there is a distinct difference between truly going into a performance cold and knowing a basic outline of what you want to do and having ornaments ready to be pulled out in a live performance. When they go on stage, it ultimately ends up sounding like they're coming up with it on the spot. And to a certain degree, there's an element of that. You are coming up with the idea in the moment based on the experience with your colleagues on the stage or even the audience feedback. But in reality, a lot of the ornamentation you're hearing a jazz artist use is stuff that they've absolutely worked out in a practice room, perhaps in a different key or under different circumstances, but the meat and potatoes of the actual ornamentation or stylistic changes tends to be something they already are very prepared to do when on stage. And so as a result, in this case, I feel a little bit like Fergie wasn't completely confident on some of the choices she's making, and consequently it doesn't really come across as effectively as perhaps she had wanted. I think I know what she wants, but I also think I know how she could get there, and I don't think she's actually that far off. It's just the final product is so far missing the mark.
And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave through the night, that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star spangled banner yet wave? O'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. Let's play some basketball!
First and foremost, let me just say, when the camera panned out, she looks so good. That dress is gorgeous. It's really classy, and I just was distracted for a moment by how cute she looked. But on the flip side, I don't love how everybody's laughing. I get why, but I definitely feel like there's elements of this performance that just simply fell off the rails for her, and that never brings me joy. I always feel like I can empathize with people who go through that because it's not like I've not had bad performances myself. I think everybody probably has. We can really, really hear very clearly what I was mentioning briefly, the breathing. It starts getting gaspy, and we also see a lot of jaw shaking when she's holding her pitches. I actually don't hate some of those belted notes she's doing. I would have said maybe a little bit more open in the back of the mouth to warm it up a bit so it's not so tongue forward. You can see very clearly in her mouth that the tongue is moving forward and creating a pretty metallic, bright color, and that's not something that I would say is inherently bad. Like I said, enjoy some elements of that texture, but in that same vein, you can really hear how she's manipulating perhaps the endings of words that end with like an R. You can also hear her separating out certain pitches and doubling up on a word. That's a strange technique. I usually wouldn't tell people to do that because it ends up almost sounding like you're skipping rocks. I think she's, again, trying to add ornamentation, trying to add stylistic changes, and I respect her for those choices, but I just don't think that they're effective in this setting and in the way that she's doing them. She consistently uses this really, really bright vowel. That is something that's distracting for me. I like warm vowels. I like very spacious, open mouths. She's opening her mouth, but then she's kind of putting the sound right in the front by her lips and making it sound very, very bright. So for example, on the word free, I wouldn't sing free, I would sing free. And just a little bit of that extra color in the back really lifts the sound and makes it feel a little bit more smooth and comfortable and warm. So when we have that moment where she goes up and then she returns back to Star Spangled Banner, I feel like she's really landing on Star Spangled Banner. She's separating those colors out, and as a result, we don't get a really good understanding of what she's saying. It's honestly a really tricky thing to do when you have to sing and you're responsible for pitch and the diction and the language and the rhythms, because trying to do all of that at once almost feels like we're missing out on the artistry. But the real artistry comes from having to fuse all those things together along with emotion. I kind of feel like she's prioritizing the emotion over everything else. I do hear diction, I do hear pitch, I do hear tone, but I think that she's really so invested in the emotional colors that she's kind of foregoing all the other things. In some ways, that makes sense, because when we have really good, reliable technique and a very clear roadmap of what we're trying to do while we sing, then we can spend a lot more of our brain power on things like the emotional context. But I don't feel like she had a strong enough direction as to where she was going before she started adding all of these fun colors and textures. So words like flag, night, those all are sitting super forward, and as an alternative, I would offer flag and night so that they feel like they're a little bit more similar to the words around them. So in this case with Fergie, is she a bad singer? Absolutely not. She's got quite a lot of good intentions, and I agree with a lot of the places that she's adding ornamentation. It's just the ornaments she's choosing and how she's going about doing them. That process is really hard for us to do when perhaps we're singing another style that we're not very confident with, or we're singing in a live setting. So all in all, what do I think of this video? I think Fergie is a very talented artist, but this is a great example of when is enough enough. And what I mean by that is you wouldn't put ketchup on everything, would you? Because then you lose some of the other complex flavors in the dish. In this case, I feel like she's trying to put so much on every single phrase that she's not savoring and simply enjoying some of the really nice written content that's available for her. You don't need to ornament or decorate every single thing you sing. This song isn't very long. I mean, the actual original is quite long, but what we sing is usually quite shortened. You want to leave space for the music to speak for itself, and as one of my former professors used to say, select choice moments to add your ornamentation and all of your different colors and textures. You don't want to do it everywhere, because then it loses some of its really impressive impact. I hope you really enjoyed this little rundown. I don't have any notes on these videos, so I'm just kind of reacting to them and giving my initial impressions, but ultimately I really hope it was useful for you. Thank you so much for spending some time with me, and remember to always keep on singing.